In a magnificent palace on the banks of the Nile, in the city of Thebes, a little boy was born who no one would ever imagine would change the face of the ancient world. He was not the son of a great queen, nor of a legitimate wife, but of a slave girl named Isis, a woman with quiet features, more silent than she spoke. They named him Thutmose, gifted by the god Thoth, but from his first day, his steps were surrounded by suspicion. The king died quickly, and the throne fell into the hands of a powerful woman, Hatshepsut, his stepmother, who refused to hand over power to a young child. Thutmose grew up in the shadows. He was not allowed to sit on the throne, but he watched. He saw the soldiers in the courtyards, the ministers in the halls, and the priests whispering ancient secrets. Thutmose walked the palace corridors like a ghost, hearing everything and forgetting nothing. But what they did not know was that this child, Thutmose, was planning his future carefully. The years passed and the boy grew up. He grew into a strong, sharp-eyed young man, skilled in archery and combat. He trained in military camps in the south, learning from his commanders, and was not satisfied with what he was given. He would stay up at night reading tablets, studying maps of the land, and training for battle, as if his entire life awaited a single battle. For about 20 years, Hatshepsut ruled the country in the name of Thutmose III. But she assumed actual power and was crowned pharaoh. During this period, Thutmose III was politically marginalized, but not completely excluded. He received military training and was sent to military camps, learning the arts of combat and administration. This stage was crucial in shaping his character as a skilled military leader and molding him into a future ruler. After Hatshepsut's death, c. 1458 BC, Thutmose III assumed full power. From that moment, he began one of the most successful and powerful periods in pharaonic Egyptian history, especially on the military level. Hatshepsut died. Overnight, the neglected boy was transformed into a king. But he wasn't just a king, he was a lion unleashed from its cage. In the heart of Thebes, where the incense fumes rose and the priests' hymns soared, the authority of the gods was administered from the temple of Amun. Thutmose knew full well that it wasn't only the gods who held the hearts of the people, but the priests as well. They became wealthy, owning lands and treasuries, and their words were obeyed as if they were commands from heaven. He approached them at first, gave them gold, and increased their influence. But over time, he began to hear whispers. The priests are plotting. Some are trying to interfere in state appointments. Who rules, the king or the gods? Thutmose confronted them not with the sword but with wisdom. He sent some on distant religious missions, brought others close to him, and divided their powers without them realizing it, as if he were pleasing everyone, but in reality, he was quietly controlling the game. Years passed after Hatshepsut's death, and with them, feelings he had never expressed began to build in Thutmose III's heart. Perhaps it was anger, a sense of betrayal, or simply a desire to erase her shadow from the throne he had so patiently endured. A silent but violent campaign began, a campaign to erase Hatshepsut from history. In the dead of night, orders trickled out from the palace. Engrave her name from the walls. Remove her statues from the temples. Change the inscriptions as if they had never existed. And at Karnak, where Hatshepsut immortalized herself among the gods, her features were erased from the inscriptions and replaced with the names of other kings. Even the obelisks she had built were left standing, but her name was hidden from them. It wasn't a killing of the body, it was a killing of the memory. But was it hatred or a reordering of the rule? No one knows except his eyes, which still blazed whenever someone spoke her name. Militarily, in the north, the Canaanite tribes rebelled, mocking the new king, saying, "He's a palace boy. He doesn't know how to fight." Thutmose III responded with a cold smile. then assembled an army numbering tens of thousands and marching along roads no armies had dared to venture before. This was the Battle of Megiddo. In this battle, he not only faced armies, but also history itself. He took a narrow mountain path that everyone had warned him against. The generals objected, and he told them, "He who fears the path is not worthy of the throne." He surprised the enemy from where he least expected it, and besieged the city until the rebels knelt at his feet. From that day on, the first page of his glory was written. He never rested. Every year he led a new campaign. He crossed the Nile, ascended the Lebanon mountains, and reached the Euphrates River. The kings of Asia sent him gifts, fear in their hearts. Every land he entered, he established control, leaving behind a learned ruler at the court of Egypt, a vassal, loyal to Amun. But glory wasn't only in the sword, it was also in the pen. He built temples, adorned Karnak with its massive columns, and immortalized his name in every stone and inscription. He made Egypt an invincible power, and everyone called it the Golden Empire. The war was also in full swing. All eyes were turned east, to a powerful new alliance emerging between the princes of Kadesh and the kings of Mitanni. They wanted to reclaim the lands that Thutmose had annexed to Egypt. The news reached the palace, and the king read it himself. "They want the Euphrates? Let them try fire," he said coldly. He led his army north, through deserts and valleys, until he approached the Euphrates River region. But the enemy was waiting for him in a narrow valley, and the ambush was carefully prepared. Thutmose stood on a high hill, overlooking the encampments, then called out to the cavalry commander, "Set the sands ablaze. Let the dust precede us, and the enemy sees only ghosts." In an instant, the Egyptian army attacked on falcon-like wings, one of the most daring maneuvers in pharaonic history. The enemy forces were crushed, and the rest fled toward the Euphrates, some jumping into the river to escape. Tablets record that the king himself crossed the river in a small boat, placing his spear on the other bank as a sign of victory. He said, "I have reached further than Pharaoh before me dreamed." We move on to the figures who stood in the shadows behind Thutmose III, but played pivotal roles in his ascension and continuation on the throne. His son, Amenhotep II, and one of his most brilliant military commanders. Amenhotep II was no ordinary son of a pharaoh. He grew up surrounded by armor and spears in a time of war, and amidst an army that never slept. He was not raised by nannies, but in the training ground, where his father watched him from afar, without a single word being added. One morning, Thutmose III grabbed a heavy spear and threw it before his son. "Lift it. If you cannot carry it, do not dream of the throne." Amenhotep raised the spear with both hands, staggered a little, then steadied himself, and looked fearlessly into his father's eyes. Only then did the king smile for the first time. Amenhotep II was quick-tempered, powerfully built, and known for his ability to shoot from horseback. He was reputed to be able to fire arrows with such force that they could tear through metal targets. Although Thutmose did not immediately grant him the throne, he sent him on military missions, teaching him how battle was more than just a sword, but rather calculations and patience. Toward the end of Thutmose's life, Amenhotep became the heir apparent, receiving support from the priests and gradually ruling alongside his father, preparing to inherit one of the greatest empires on earth. In every battle Thutmose fought, there were steps ahead of him on the ground, the steps of Jetshudi, the leader who knew no defeat. The commander of elite units, a man with a nose as sharp as a hawk's and eyes that never sleep. He was the first to enter the battlefield and the last to leave. He disliked palaces or celebrations. His place was in the sand, among the soldiers. At the Battle of Megiddo, when the army was surrounded, he said to the king, "Let me crush them by night." But Thutmose replied with a smile, "We don't strike in the dark. We terrorize them by day." Euphrates understood the king like no one else. He wasn't just an executor of orders, but a military advisor who weighed his words like a sword. It is said that they had a heated discussion before the campaign on the Euphrates River, and Euphrates said to him, "If you make a mistake this time, we may not return." To which Thutmose calmly replied, "Even if we don't go, our name will never be remembered." After the victory, Euphrates said to his soldiers, "What do you think? We were right, or we merely served an infallible king?" One day, Thutmose III sat in one of the courtyards of the Karnak temple. Having completed lengthy religious rites, security was assured, gold was flowing from the south, and inscriptions were being carved on the walls at his command. A Minotaur approached him and sat beside him. King Thutmose III said to him, "You don't need to prove yourself to me, but you will spend your life proving to the world that you are Thutmose's son." Then he looked up at the sky and saw a bird circling above them. He said, "When I die, I will not cry. I will leave as this bird does, in silence, but everyone will see its shadow." In his final days, he stood on the balcony of his palace, looking out at the Nile as if it were his old friend. He knew death was approaching, but he was not afraid. He said to those around him, "I have conquered the whole earth, but I have not opened my heart to despair." Then he closed his eyes and departed silently, as all great men have. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings, far from the noise of the cities, but the echo of his name was never buried. He died shortly after, and Amenhotep walked on the road. But the bird's shadow continued to hover over Egypt for generations.